Good morning, afternoon, or whatever it is. I don't know after that car accident out front. We almost lost the front porch here on the day of the grand opening, but we made it. Thank you for coming out today. Today's been at least 6.5 years in the making since we acquired this property. But then prior to that, we'd been talking about what to do to find more space a few years before that. So this has been many more years than that in the making. First of all, I just want to acknowledge who the board members are. So if you're out there, wave your hand or whatever you want to do when I read your name. But Ted Tomlinson, Donna Stone, Jeannie Beers, Jeannie Butters, Donna Beers. I'm tired, man. This is six years. All right. Jeannie Butters, Donna Beers, Lorelei Colton, Tom Carl, Ann Carl, Crawford Holmes, Bob Storch, Scott Shedden, and myself. And I also want to mention 3 board members who were on the board that have passed away over the time that we've been working on this, that had contributed in one way or another, going all the way back to the beginning when we were still trying to figure out what to do with finding a different building. Michelle Lamphere was on the board for a short time, and she passed away. Marie O'Hara had been on the board for several years, participated in many lively meetings, always sat next to me in the meetings. And Marie, when she was very young, spent time staying in this house with Stanley Morris, who was the funeral director, was her uncle. So she told me many times, like Mildred Van Dyke used to do, "Are you going to get this done before I'm dead?" Well, but we finally remember Marie O'Hara. And John Schaefer as well was on the board for quite a while. And John, as you know, from the Canton area, had the Canton Sentinel, and also quite a local historian for many years. And much of his material is now here. So we're very grateful for that. And I know Joe Chapel's out there. He's a former board member. And is Betty Vanoy here? I'm not sure. Not here, but Betty Vanoy was on the board a little bit before we started this. But just a few comments. I thought for 6 years, what do you say at the grand opening of something like this? Really, I'm just tired and we just want to open it. But finally, just a few things for me, and then we have a couple people that are going to say some things before we cut the ribbon. I remember when I was quite young, if you lived in LeRoy, you rode past this house on the school bus all the time. And I always looked at this house and thought it was really cool. I didn't know Jeannie then, but Jeannie's on the board now. But always thought it was really neat. Always looked up at it when I went by and wondered what it was like inside and all of this stuff. And so several years later, when Jeannie sold the house and Mark and Laura Crossan bought the property, I had a little bit more opportunity to take a look inside there then, and was even more fascinated. But I didn't know much of the history about it, and no one else seemed to know a whole lot about it either, other than it had been a hotel. And so when we finally had the opportunity to figure out what building we were going to expand into, this was definitely high on the list. But it was hard to imagine how it was going to be possible to acquire the property. And so we looked at this once, and it didn't work out. We ended up looking at 3 other places around town, trying to figure something out. Nothing really worked well. And we ended up back here again. And the second time we looked at it, everything worked out. And that was in 2015. So then we began the process that has gone on since then, of little at a time, preserving the building and also turning it back into a commercial building so it could be used as a museum. And so that first meant taking out things that had been done before. There was an apartment in this section. There were other changes made in the house, doors moved and things, and flooring was completely different. And just a lot of work needed to be done. And so over that period of time, we acquired several grants from different locations We acquired funding from various businesses, foundations, just about everywhere we could find funding to do this project. So I think the combination, I didn't add everything up, but just in my head knowing what I've applied for and what we've done, between the purchase of the property by Rodney Mott back in 2015 and then the money that we've spent to get to this point, we're pretty close to $500,000 that's gone into making this happen. And it's astonishing to me, but certainly back when we started, probably we wouldn't have done it if that's what we thought, but we thought that about the Grange building too, and that got done. So it happens a little bit at a time, but the wait is usually worth it, and I hope that's what you'll think today when you see it. Of course, I didn't get all the labels done, all the exhibits, because I ran out of energy. And I just said, that's it. We're just going to quit. And we got a lot of things that came from the Manly Blair farm in the middle of this process. And we had not planned on that when we started this. So incorporating what they had together with what we had, and fortunately what they had in most cases was different from what we had and filled in a lot of the gaps. But in the process of doing that, you had to just incorporate all that together and figure out what's more important, what can be done. And so the things that didn't get put on display are in storage here, so we can have rotating displays as well. And probably we'll still have some displays down to our other building here down the street. So at Barkley Mountain Day and Old Home Day, there'll still be some things down there in that building. But primarily our research material stayed down there. Our museum came up here, and this place is more visible, as you can see with the traffic out here, that people can, you can see it way down the road now, of course, with the paint job too, but this place works out a lot better for space. It gave us not only more room for exhibits, but room for storage that we never planned on down there, room for office space to have all of our business type records, and room to have meetings in a place that's actually handicap accessible if it needed to be. So we didn't have any of that down the street, nor did we have any parking, septic, water, or anything. So we have indoor plumbing now. That's the best part of the whole thing. So we're going to have a few speakers today that are going to just say a few things about some of the funding. First of all, I'll have Kane Chamberlain come up, and he's from the Endless Mountains Heritage Region. And I'll just say we've used Heritage Region money going way back before Kane Chamberlain, way back when I was still 18 years old. And Bob Veliker said, hey, why don't you fill out an application and we can get you some money? And that's where it began. So there you go.
Thanks, Matt. So, as Matt said, I'm Kane Chamberlain. I'm Executive Director of the Endless Mountains Heritage Region, and it's been a really cool process to see this become what it is now. When I started in late 2018, this was actually one of the first visits we'd made because Matt had just gotten the big grants to do a lot of the renovations inside to get the project really started. So I went back and I figured out, because we've awarded a couple of grants to Matt, not only here, but at the Bradford County Historical Society. He does a great job with both. But we found out that we had contributed just under $50,000 to this particular project since 2017. So we're really proud of that. We're proud to be a part of it. And I know all of you, all those other funders that Matt mentioned to get that $500,000 mark, I know you're really proud to be a part of this as well. LeRoy isn't really the first town that comes to mind when people think Bradford County, but when you come out to Barkley, Heritage Days and all those things that Matt's really organized here, you really see how great of a community this is and how many people come out here to explore Barkley Mountain or just this small little town, and now we're going to have this really nice, cool feature for the neighborhood as well. So the funding that we contributed was for hotel renovations, interior improvements, and the exterior painting that you see here now. Really made the structure look absolutely beautiful. And at the EMHR, that's really what we're all about, is preserving our culture, our history, and getting people in the outdoors for outdoor recreation and things like that. So to see a project like this come to fruition, I know it makes Matt really happy. I think anytime I'd call him on the phone and say, hey, you need some more funding, I'd hear this. So yeah, so Matt was always great to work with, always has been, and we look forward to doing more with you in the future, whether it be at the Historical Society here or whatever other endeavors you undertake in trying to preserve our history here in the county. So thank you so much, Matt, and thanks to everyone who's been a part of this. You've done an outstanding job, and I'm really looking forward to see the inside now that it's completely done, because it seems every time I was here it was in gradual steps, just baby step progress, and it has turned out to be a really awesome place, and I'm looking forward to coming over here in the future. So thanks, Matt. Thank you, everybody.
One of the things that the Heritage Region funded was that bridge back there, which is not a handicapped accessible ramp to the second floor. It's just a fire escape and also a way to load things to the second floor without putting in an elevator that costs much more. So that was a big deal too. During this process, I've been renting the apartment in the back. There's a caretaker's apartment in the back. And so some of the funny things that have occurred over the years being here, many of them center around snakes, of course. When we first got here, the weeds were probably up to my waist, at least up there, but definitely around the back. And so we had a work bee, and all the board members showed up, and we cleaned this bank off here, and there's pictures online about that. But what had been hiding in all the weeds was mice and snakes that had gotten into the house. The house was full of mice, and I soon found that out living here, that it was going to be interesting. So finally, after a period of years and all the work we did, we got the mice out. Most of the snakes went away, but that's kind of an interesting thing. Now, with this car flying through the lawn out here this morning, it reminds me of the day when I woke up, was getting ready to leave for work, and a lady on a very icy day came flying off the road, up through the lawn, smashed through the corner of the shed, and was up here on the bank. And I was in the shower when it happened. And I came out, and there was a car on the side of the bank, and I don't even know what happened. Everyone was gone. But anyway, she survived, everyone survived, and we met some of the neighbors that day and everything. So it worked out pretty good. We fixed the shed, and insurance paid for that, so nothing lost. But anyway, it's quite a place to be. So next, I'm going to have Robin Cummings come, and we've had room tax money, and that has helped with some things, so she can talk about that.
I think we actually should owe Matt a round of applause. I think being a curator of a museum, not one but two, that does such an exceptional job in our communities and is such a representative of our history and our heritage, that is not an easy task to do. So, Matt, I mean, you're a huge civic leader in our community, and your accomplishments and your tremendous board. We know these things like this do not happen by one person alone, but by a great board. But I tell you, you are one heck of a leader, my friend. And anytime I call Matt, I always say, I have travel writers coming through. I need you. Can you do a tour? Can you take them into Wanda, or would you like them in LeRoy? And he just says, you tell me where you want me. You tell me who they are, and I will be there and make that happen. So I always appreciate that partnership and the relationship that we have to make sure that we are showing the best and the big anchor museums that we have here in our county, and how rich we are with our history and our heritage. And Matt is always so welcoming of the people that I welcome to and I bring to him, and he just gives them a tremendous experience. And I know when they leave, they are surprised, but they are fully enriched in the knowledge that Matt shares with them being here in Bradford County. So I had reached out to Matt last year, specifically when we were putting together the Experience Bradford County Tour Guide, which is a 60,000 piece guide that the tourism agency puts on to really showcase and highlight all the assets of Bradford County. And I said, I really want to do a story with you on the LeRoy Museum. And he said, no. And I was like, I'm sorry, excuse me? It's free. It's going to be free. And he says, no, not this year, though. Can we do it next year when it opens, for the grand opening? And I thought, oh, Matt, okay, yes, we'll wait till next year. But I had, my heart nearly skipped a beat as it almost did this morning too, when Matt was like, no, because I thought, you are such a huge promoter of your museums. I'm going to help you with this. And then he followed up and said, no, next year. So we were really proud that when we put the guide out, we were able to showcase the museum. We've gotten a lot of phone calls about their hours and how to get in touch with Matt because they wanted to come and learn more. And through the visitors that come here, we are the second end of the room tax, which funds the room tax grants through the occupancy of the hotels. And since 2015, I did some notes like Kane did. It's been right around $35,000 that the Tourism Promotion Agency has been able to partner with the LeRoy Museum on for advertising and promotion, signage, brochures, rat cards that will help promote and advertise this tremendous asset. So we're really glad to be a part of this partnership, and we're really glad for the friendship. So thank you so much for inviting me, Matt, and a tremendous job to you and your entire board. Thank you so much.
Of course, in the middle of this, we had COVID-19. And we were going to shut down for a year prior to any of that happening and move the museum and then reopen the following year, so we would be shut down. We ended up shutting down a year in advance, so it ended up that we've now been closed 2 years, which actually turned out to be perfect and worked out very well anyway. Not that I want COVID again, but it turned out pretty well that we ended up doing that. And I want to mention that back in 2015, of course, the property we wouldn't have acquired, first of all, without Rodney Mott. I don't know if they're here today or not, out there anywhere. There's several here. First of all, the Crossan family that owned this, they had an appraisal done on the house, and we had an amount in mind that we needed to have to purchase this property. And we finally got it down to a point where the Motts thought that they would be able to do that, and so they helped out in that regard. But then the Motts stepped up and took over the process of purchasing the property for us, and we didn't even really have to be involved in the whole thing other than some phone calls. And they had previously helped with the Grange Hall down the street, and purchasing this property, it was $200,000 plus $6,000 in fees to acquire this property here, which is an amazing donation. It's probably the largest one we've ever received. And we wouldn't be here today had that donation not been made, because we certainly couldn't have come up with that money just to buy a piece of property. But the reason we bought this piece of property, or we're very interested in this piece of property, is it has such an interesting story with it. It's been so many things over the years: a hotel, doctor's office, funeral home, rest home, to name a few. And so it has lots of history. This building had a store in it as well. You can learn all about the Lewis brothers in the foyer way in there. There's a whole wall about that. Had a store, a hotel, a ballroom upstairs. Even actually had an addition off this side that's no longer there. And so anyone that had any connection to this area by family, your family probably dealt with or worked with the Lewises at some point. You probably bought something out of the store, or your relatives stayed in the hotel when they came to town, or you went to a dance upstairs, or something or other took place. So it's really an important building, not just because it was a big building and a nice location, but it had a history to go with it, that the building itself is almost as much of a historical exhibit as any of the things that are inside. And fortunately, it had been preserved over the years, thanks for many of the years to the Sherwoods and the Butters, who were forcibly made to clean the stairway and polish the steps, which I have done and absolutely hate doing. So I can feel your pain, Jeannie, because that's... But because that was done, the woodwork is original. It was not in the main part. It's never been affected, painted, whatever. And so we've polished it up a little bit. You can still see some dings here and there, but she's from 1896, so she's not going to be perfect condition, but she's about as perfect as we can make it. So I'm going to ask Senator Yaw to come up next and say what he would like to say about this project.
What I'd like to say about it is I'm honored to be here and to have received an invitation to come and help cut your ribbon. Yeah, I went on the website, and I don't know how many of you have gone on the website, but it's very informative. Number one, when I looked at it, it said permanently closed. I think you probably should change that this afternoon. You might want to do that. But the other thing is I actually watched the video, and how many times I've driven by this building, I can't, over the past 13, 14 years, hundreds of times, and I never slowed up enough to look to see what was here. So this is kind of I will, every time I go by here now, it will have a different, it certainly will take on a different character for me. I think that Matt kind of understates everything. In the video, he became interested in history at 10 years old. And he said this idea didn't come to fruition until, what, you were about 18? And now he's almost 40. That is the classic definition, I think, of perseverance. I can't imagine anything else to have something in your mind and want to keep plugging away at it until it comes to, here it is, and it's going to be great. I grew up on a farm in Cascade Township in the outlying part of Lycoming County, and it was a farm that my parents bought from my grandparents. And my grandparents had been involved in farming. Best way I can describe it is subsistence farming. They had this old barn, and I used to love, as a kid, go down in the barn and go through some of the old tools and things that were there that nobody paid attention to anymore. I think that that's absolutely critical. It's critical to remember where we came from. It's critical for all the things that we want to teach our kids. One of the things I know that we have, I've run into in other museums like this is getting kids to come to them. And there was one farm museum outside of Muncie, and the person who started it said their biggest problem wasn't the kids. It said getting the teachers to bring the kids and having the teachers understand what it was all about and what some of the tools were and how people sacrificed and what they had to do. So, anything you can do along those lines would be greatly appreciated. My one final comment, and Matt said he's tired, and he said that he wants this thing, and somebody asked him when it was going to be done. My guess is this. I hate to give you some really bad news, but this is a living, moving adventure that's yours started here, and my guess is it will never be, quote, done. So thank you for the opportunity to participate and to present that really good news to you.
Which means we need volunteers. And while you're all here, one thing, we have run the museum on volunteers this whole time, and we are looking for people who are willing to work on Saturdays 1 to 4, even one day out of the summer, to help us out. You're always working with someone that's been working before, so it's not like you have to figure it out on your own. But if you want to talk to someone at the counter in there today while you're here, and there's actually a sign-up sheet conveniently in there for different dates. If you're interested in that, and ahead of time, we'll get you hooked up with what you need to know. And Jeannie's probably going to be here every day that we're open, so she can help you out too. Also, 21 years ago when we began, I remember prior to that I went to an auction here right in LeRoy when I was a teenager, And I guess that's what got me thinking that something had to be done to preserve history, because there was local history at the auction that was sold, and man, did it bother me. And I was a teenager, but it bothered me. And a few years later, after I was out of high school, sent out a press release, and we had our first meeting down there, and people that, several are still on the board today, Bob Storch, Ted Tomlinson, my parents, of course, showed up, and others, some of them now gone, and we started this thing out, and it's been 21 years have gone by since then. It just doesn't seem possible, but it started with a spark of something's got to be done to preserve history, and we've got to do something about it. So I think that's how these things usually start anyway, but that's what reminded me of that. Is there anyone else that wants to say anything today? There's plenty of people here. I can't see everyone, but help yourself.
Hi, I'm Russ Nelson. I live in Elmira, and my wife and I have done a lot of exploring on Barclay Mountain. We found the railroad that goes around to the Switchback Railroad, the narrow gauge that comes up from Lakeland. So we could do a hike there about 10 miles. And the gravity incline brake house is only about a mile from the parking lot. So a mile in, a mile out. There's a little bit of stepping over of logs and things, so I'm sorry, you wouldn't be able to make it. But if we brought a chainsaw, anyway, if people are interested in doing this hike, send me an email, russnelson@gmail.com. And we'll organize a hike, pick a date sometime later in the summer, hopefully a beautiful day like today, and go see some history.
I'd like to mention that on the wall in here, there's a large plaque that lists all of the major donors when we first started out, and then over the years we had the opportunity to give, and if you gave in particular levels, then your name or whatever, a memorial name or whatever was placed on the wall. So there's a large plaque in the gift shop. There's also signs next to certain windows. There's rooms that are named for people. There's all sorts of things. So you'll find those throughout the building. I want to mention Chesapeake, which is here today, the gas industry, which has been right here on the mountain this whole time, has been important in helping us raise funds to keep this thing moving. Both the pipeline and the drilling companies, both, and before Chesapeake Chief. And part of what we do with Barclay Mountain Heritage Day is tell about the history of natural resource development, I guess you could say, and coal mining, lumbering, and so on, but even today it's natural gas. And so that fit right into what we were doing, and kind of fits in today because this building is part of the lumbering industry. It was built by lumbermen. So just another interesting connection that we've had there. So let's check the paper and make sure there's nothing left out. I will mention that today we have Janice Brown here to play the piano, and I want to thank David Lennington. She's back here. David Lennington, if you know David Lennington, he's a doer and a pusher and wants to do things, get things done, and usually if he comes to me with an idea for a program, I'll just say, that sounds great, because he's very specific and gets everything done and covers every basis and pays for everything himself most of the time. So David Lennington contacted me several months ago and said, I know you've got that square piano down there. I'd like to have that, tuned and have someone there to play it for your grand opening as background music. And I said that would be great. So he arranged all of that, and a visit of a piano tuner that came and got it all up to specs, and she will be playing that today. And the piano came from Charles Rockwell's home. We moved it here just shortly after we got this property, so here it's been sitting in the house covered up with blankets while we renovated around it for all these years. But it's an 1866 square piano, Mathushek piano, and the piano had belonged to a doctor that lived in LeRoy here, later lived in Canton. It was then given to the Canton Church of Christ, where it sat there many years. Charlie Rockwell bought it in the 1980s and had it restored, put it in his home, and a few years before he passed away, we went up there and moved it out of his house and down here, and here it's been. And it probably hasn't been played in many years, but she will be playing that today. So I just want to thank her and David, who couldn't be here today, for their contribution to this event. So I'm going to ask if the board members and any of the other, Senator Yaw, any of the other people, the grant people, anyone that's funded things, feel free to come forward. We're going to cut the ribbon. There's 12 sets of scissors, so not everyone probably gets scissors, but feel free to be up here because we're going to take some pictures of that. If someone's got cameras out there, some board members or their spouses perhaps, if you could take some pictures, and then we will open the museum and let you go in there.